What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Going the Distance podcast presented by ImmaculateSports.com. Twitter's at ImacSports.
Instagram is also at ImacSports.
TikTok, YouTube, Immaculate Sports. It's episode 278. The Indiana Hoosiers are your national champions of football, Division 1A. What a ridiculous season, 16-0. Awesome game last night, too, to cap it off. Also, the Final Four in the NFL. And a little bit of basketball. So we were worried we weren't going to have enough to talk about today, but seems like we got just the right amount to rant about today, Kyle.
Yeah, we're in a good spot for the NBA season check-in. We haven't really talked about the NBA much at all ever since we did our preseason preview. We're about midway. I think every team's played about 40 games at this point, so it's a good time to check in, see where we're at, especially since we don't want to grade all the head coaches until all the head coaches are filled. Obviously, we have a new head coaching spot open as well, too, with Buffalo. Bit of a crazy story there. So we'll do those grades once we get all of them, so we understand how good some of these teams did and how bad maybe some of them did. Like you hit on as well, too, the college national championship was ridiculous yesterday. Indiana 16-0, very much a NCAA dynasty rebuild type situation going on with Signetti and the Hoosiers. I imagine whoever's trying to make the movie right now is just trying to figure out who's going to play Kurt Signetti in the movie. I'm interested to see how that casting goes, but that movie will be happening at some point.
I definitely thought about that last night.
Yeah, but that should be cool when that does come out in the far future. But in the near future, we have to talk about our openers and some other stuff as well, too. So why don't you go ahead and tell me about the Cooperstown announcement that we got just like a couple hours ago.
Yeah, we just found this out, but we got another two members join in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Andrew Jones. Let's start with Andrew Jones because he gets in on the 9th year. Ridiculous counting stats. A very long peak of his career. I know you're a fan of the Jaws 7 type of stuff. Numbers that only are comparable to Ken Griffey and Willie Mays, yet it takes him 9 years to get on the ballot. We finally get some younger votes, and we see that just shoot up here. He gets in at 78% today on his 9th year. Massive jump. He gets in before the 10th year, and I'm very happy. Because, like you said, things are changing, right? You don't need to have 300 wins and 500 homers to be a Hall of Famer because the guys who were teaching us about the stats that matter a little bit more are now able to vote on this. Also, Carlos Beltran gets in today. So back-to-back center fielders, which is crazy. We don't see a lot. They were talking about on the broadcast, right? The last one was Ken Griffey. It's just such a prestige position, just like shortstop, that they don't want to elect in one too many. So they've been a little cautious on that, but Carlos Beltran gets the 84%, well above what he needs in his 4th year. We're worried at first about, is his involvement in the 2017 Astros stuff going to cause any trouble here, but not really. He's okay. So he gets in. A couple guys that were massive movers. Chase Utley, one you were on early 3 years ago, I think. He's now up to 59%. So he's getting in the Hall of Fame. In a couple years from now. Another thing that they talked about on the broadcast, too, was his middle infield co-partner, Jimmy Rollins, did not move up this year, only 25%. But maybe it's going back to the center fielder thing. Shortstop is just like some guys, they have to have the perfect shortstop. They're not going to elect a guy just because he won an MVP. They're just going to be stubborn about that. Another one I was really happy about was Felix Hernandez, right? He's not going to have the innings you need, but we know firsthand that guy was dominant for like 11 straight years in a row, one of the best pitchers in the American League. Many guys fall off like Manny Ramirez, but they weren't shockers. I will say one other guy to watch out for, Cole Hamels, first year, 23%. Pretty good. And that's like the category of the postseason hero pitcher, where another guy, he's not going to have the innings that Andy Pettitte has. But hey, just as good numbers when you're into the postseason. We'll see that with Bumgarner and John Lester in a few years from now, how those guys react. Buster Posey will be a first ballot Hall of Famer next season. After that, it's kind of up in the air again. So interested to find out what happens, but we love this stuff. So I had to talk about it for the opener here.
Yeah, I definitely thought it was interesting as well too. Cool for Beltran and Andrew Jones. Curious to see. I don't know if I'd call this a good litmus test for that 2017 Astros because this was the very tail end of his career. Obviously, once we're talking about Altuve, Correa, Bregman, Springer, those guys for this
Mhm.
stuff, it'll be a bit different. And I'm sure there'll be a big narrative with those guys. But definitely, I think Beltran's deserving. Probably one of the most talented players we've ever seen in the league. Same thing with Andrew Jones, pretty much like, the five-tool player that kind of can do it all. Just a ridiculous athlete. Um, Cole Hamels first year, 23.8%. He was pretty much the only standout from the first class or first year players on this. Good to see Ryan Braun not get any votes.
Yeah.
That was expected. He gets 3.5%, which is actually even more than I expected, considering he got popped twice for PEDs, if I remember correctly. The scale's not making it. I'm good with that. Does suck, I guess, just to see some of these guys that I really like watching growing up, like in Encarnacion, Sinsu Chu, Matt Kemp, Gio Gonzalez. Obviously, they weren't going to make it. But still, come on, give
No
Gio a
votes.
vote or
Yeah.
something, or Daniel Murphy or Howie Kendrick. Those guys had some very big postseason moments. Would have been cool to see at least one vote for them, but I get it. This was one of the weaker classes for first years in a long time, I'd say, as well too. So I'm good with it. In other news, my huge opener, there wasn't really anything crazy. Obviously, Fernando Mendoza could have gone that path. He's been my opener about 3 times already. So I went with an interesting one, and it's the reported news of Miguel Andujar and the A's being interested in a reunion. Andujar is still a free agent at this point after his end of season with the Cincinnati Reds. Pretty much applicable to about 20 teams in the MLB right now because he's a good hitter, has experience playing third, first, left, right. So really all over the diamond. Obviously, he could play DH as well too. And his bat is definitely a big part of his game. And with the recent news of the A's, I guess being very close to acquiring Nolan Arenado, with the Nolan Arenado pretty much saying no, it seems like maybe they're not trying to look inside for this third base position dilemma that they had that they originally said that they would just solve internally. Miguel Andujar seems to be an option, and I would welcome that because I love Miggy. He was really good for us last year in his second year in the green and gold. And if you had him in as pretty much a sure, 700 OPS, hard out type guy, that makes this A's lineup like have no weak spots, I'd say, except for maybe Denzel Clark in center. But on the other side of the ball, he's the best defensive center fielder in the game. So it'd be cool to bring in Miguel Andujar. Maybe the Nolan Arenado stuff indicates that they're willing to spend a little bit because it seemed like the offer that the A's had for Arenado meant that they were going to pay him more than what the Diamondbacks were going to as far as the contract goes and the money coming over from St. Louis. So maybe Geno Suarez is still in play. I don't really know what his contract offers are looking like, but that would be a fun one. And with the starting pitcher market so high, maybe the A's are just like, fuck it, we'll just out hit everybody. And if they get Geno Suarez, they could probably just out hit everybody, and that would be realistic. So we'll see how that goes. But obviously, any interest, negotiations, or signings for the A's are things that we will welcome as A's fans with how our history has been.
Yes.
Moving on, though, to our defensive player, and rookie of the week in the NFL. We had 4 games. I'd say 2 of them, maybe 3 of them were good. Player of the week, defensive player of the week, rookie of the week. Who do you choose for the player of the week, Skyler?
It was a very big divisional round for defense all across the league, and there are a ton of honorable mentions, but I'm going to wait until the next award to get into all of that and just pick Kenneth Walker as my player of the week. 145 yards from scrimmage, 3 rushing touchdowns as Seattle throttles the Niners so bad that it felt like that game was like 3 weeks ago already. So he's going to want another 1 or 2 of these to finish out the year now that Charbonnet is out for the season. But on a good note, Seattle riding very high after that win.
Yeah, Kenneth Walker, player of the week for me as well. 3 touchdowns on 22 touches, almost 150 all-purpose yards. was very consistent on his carries, only along the 15. And when you do that over 19 carries and you get 116 yards, you're not having a lot of like 0 to 1 yard carries in there. A lot of them are, meaningful gains on first down, second down, and obviously moving the chains on third. So good job on Kenneth Walker. I think Rashid Shaheed is an honorable mention for here as well, too. Once that happened at the beginning of the game, you're like, oh, it's going to be this type of game. And obviously Niner fans are pretty scared once that happened. But Kenneth Walker, Rashid Shaheed, you can go either way. I'll go K9 for this one. Defensive player of the week, very defensive-driven week, it felt like.
Yeah, I got to shout out Will Anderson for his 3 sacks. Kobe Durant had 2 big interceptions, even though he almost blew it at the end. Carlton Davis also did that too. But I went with Marcus Jones of the Patriots. He had the pick 6. I should say the first pick 6 off of C.J. Stroud. That was their first touchdown of the day, and it flipped everything. The Texans could not recover from that play, and that's kind of been the theme of our defensive player of the week. I think this was the biggest defensive play of the week.
I went with Cam Curl for mine. He had the I don't call it game sealing pick, but big pick nonetheless in overtime for the Rams and their victory over the Bears. A lot of people were talking about DJ Moore on this play and his kind of effort lapse here, but Cam Curl made an amazing diving catch in the snow, even on a ball that he juggled a little bit. And I don't think a lot of people are giving him enough credit for that. So Cam Curl, my defensive player of the week, made a very tough catch in super cold weather, pretty much diving onto concrete at that point when it's that cold. So Cam Curl sends the Rams to the conference championship, and he's my pick. What about the rookie of the week? Not a lot standing. So who'd you choose here?
Yeah, even though I'm not the biggest PFF supporter on here, weeks like this is when I'm grateful to have the unique number like rookie grades just to see who actually is available. So I actually didn't realize that Patriot safety Craig Woodson from Cal was still a rookie. He had an interception, 3 breakups on Stroud, a fumble recovery, and a quarterback hit. So that was the biggest thing I saw. 90 grade on PFF, which we don't go by PFF for everything, but he was way above everybody else on the Patriots defense on the grades.
Yeah. I think with how the game started, I think Pat Bryant would have been a good rookie of the week. Obviously, he gets hurt on the first series, I think, after having 3 catches for 32 yards. So I went with his rookie teammate, R.J. Harvey. I know it wasn't a crazy game, only 6 carries for 20 yards and 5 receptions for 46 yards, but a couple of big third down conversions in there. 24-yard catch in overtime, I believe, that really got the Broncos into Bills' field position. And then after that, a couple quote-unquote pass interferences downfield that led to the Broncos' victory and Bo Nix breaking his ankle. But R.J. Harvey, I think, came up big when the Broncos needed it, and he's the guy that I'll choose for my rookie of the week, even though there was a fumble, I think. I don't know if it technically went to his name, but it definitely felt like it was more Bo Nix on that play than it was on him. So R.J. Harvey gets my rookie of the week.
I felt the same way about him. I was like, it's only 5 carries, but it was like 5 for 26 and 4 first down. So there you go.
Exactly. Moving on, we have the championship game predictions that we got to do. 2 games, of course, on Sunday, and the first of which is the AFC Drake May versus Jarrett Stidham. Obviously, the storyline been this past week out of the teams that are still in it that Bo Nix is out, broken ankle, fractured ankle, whatever you want to call it. He's not playing. He's in Birmingham, Alabama, getting that shit looked at and fixed. So Jarrett Stidham taking over the reins for the Broncos. This game's in Denver. Both teams are 14-3. New England is a 5.5-point favorite to over under 42.5. Temperature, according to ESPN, is going to be at 32 degrees come game time. How do you think this one plays out?
So, yeah, New England being a favorite in Denver is definitely odd, but it's for good reason. Like you said, Bo Nix is not playing the rest of the season. But I did think he looked great against Buffalo. For being his first career playoff game, he used his legs very well. He avoided every sack attempt from Buffalo. So that's really tough not having him, of course. But I do think Stidham can be an accurate quarterback. he just doesn't have the same wheels. I'm afraid what happens when they start blitzing him. The Patriots, on the other hand, are relatively healthy. Their defense just made CJ Stroud look like he was DJ Lagway at Florida. So I can only imagine what they're going to do to a guy who hasn't thrown a pass in almost 2 years. And, I try to keep my bias out of the way on these kind of things when we make predictions. But this year, I think I was too harsh on the Patriots. Drake May, I think to win this game, they just need to score about 17 points and they'll be fine. I will say, though, even Tom Brady was like 1-4 in the playoffs at Mile High. But with the backup quarterback, I just find it really hard to pick Denver. Unfortunately, I got Patriots winning ugly, 20-13, getting back to the Super Bowl. Considering how ugly the rebuild was about to be with Gerard Mayo, they flipped it very quickly.
Patriots game against the Texans this past week was close by score, but it really didn't feel that close. But the thing I looked at when looking at this game and watching it is Drake May was pressured a ton. He was sacked 5 times, and I know the Texans' defense is good. They're great. Not just good, it's great. But the pass rush of the Denver Broncos is next level, and it's a lot better than what the Texans have. And that's no shot on Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter. Those are amazing pass rushers. But the Broncos had 68 sacks this year, and that's the most in the league. They're going to get after this young, inexperienced Patriots O-line that is going to be dealing with the mile-high altitude that they've never dealt with in their entire career. It's going to be tough to deal with for them. Denver's obviously been used to it, and I think there's going to be a serious disadvantage for the Patriots O-line. Definitely evident in the pass game with New England's receivers that outside of Diggs and Booty aren't that great. But definitely also evident in the run game as well, too, I'd imagine. We'll get into the next level and stuff like that. The other side of the ball, I think, will be pretty comparable to what we saw with CJ Stroud against the Patriots defense. I don't think Stidham's going to throw 4 picks. But this is a guy who, 3 years ago now at this point, had one of the best games I've ever seen against a Niners defense that was just balling out, one of the best in the league at that time. And he almost had the Raiders screw up their tank that year and beat the Niners on New Year's Day in 2023, I think, at this point. But I don't think Stidham's, just a walk in the park. This guy's going to lose backup. I think he's got the ability to make plays. He's got the arm talent to push it downfield. And he's got the wherewithal with the Broncos offense. He's been in that playbook for 3 years at this point. He's been there ever since Russell Wilson was there. I would not be shocked if they win this game. And with the odds being what they are and Denver being at home, I'm going to pick the Broncos to win this game. I think if you have the opportunity, bet on Stidham Super Bowl MVP at plus 2,000-3,000, whatever it is, I think it's a pretty good odd to just throw a couple bucks down. Considering he's the quarterback of one of these teams. And if he wins this game, anything is possible. So I'll go Broncos win this one. I don't think it's 45-30 or something like that, but I'll go 20 to 18. I don't know how they get to 18, but it happens.
Okay.
And Denver wins this game. The next game, 3.5 hours later, maybe 3 hours and 50 minutes later, if it goes into overtime, the Rams and the Seahawks, one of the best matchups that we've seen in the NFL this year. They've played twice. The score differential between those two games combined is, I think, 1 point, leaning the Rams side. Both games are phenomenal. First game, Sam Darnold threw 4 picks in LA, and they were still a missed field goal from Jason Myers away from winning that game. On the other side, they play Thursday night in Seattle. Ridiculous game, back and forth. The Rams score a touchdown to open overtime, and the Seahawks march right down the field, score a touchdown back, and then finish off with a 2-point conversion to A.J. Barner, I believe, to finish off that game and get the win there. That's the main reason why the Seahawks have the number 1 seed and the Rams are the number 5 seed, and that's why this game is in Seattle. Seattle's a 2.5-point favorite. 47.5 over-under, just a little bit higher than what we saw for the other game. How do you think this game plays out?
Yes, we do get that Seattle-LA rematch I've been hoping for, because I think that was the best game of the regular season. Definitely the craziest. But Seattle is the hottest team in the NFL right now. They're coming off of major destruction of the Niners. Their defense has been amazing. They're giving up less than 10 points a game over the last month. But I expect this one to be much higher scoring than the majority of the games we've seen, considering the weather should be pretty nice in Seattle, actually, on Sunday. The Rams, they've had many close calls this season, but they did outcoach the opponent once again. They shut down the Bears running game. They got 3 interceptions off of Caleb, even though he did have a pretty good game. Kyron Williams came through when the receivers weren't getting open. So this should be an awesome game. And, LA fans have got to feel like they got screwed in week 16 off of the 2-point conversion, fumble, backwards pass play. And I keep hearing people say that the Rams are a warm weather team. They're soft, like they haven't been playing these kind of games consistently for 10 years. So I am going to stick with the Rams. I've been picking them since the first week of the playoffs, just because I trust McVay and I trust his whole staff to get an upset here. I know it's an upset. It's going to be an uphill battle, that's for sure. But it's a familiar foe, too, especially what they just did to Ben Johnson last week. So I'm going to take another very wild game. Rams win 31-30 in the new game of the year.
The first game in this was very sloppy. Sam Darnold threw 4 picks. Matt Stafford didn't have the greatest game either. I think the final score was like 21-19 or something like that. And like I said, Jason Myers was a 58-yarder or 60-yarder field goal away from winning this game for the Seahawks as the time went down. The next game, the offenses figured it out. Stafford, I believe, threw for like 450 yards. Puka had 200 plus, couple of touchdowns, ruined my fantasy season. But the thing that stuck out to me in the Rams' first couple of games and the Seahawks' first game of the playoffs, and going back to when they got Rashid Shaheed, is that there is a major special teams difference between these two teams. The defenses, defense, Rams offense versus Seahawks defense, good on good, great on great, actually. On the other side, the Seahawks offense versus the Rams defense, I'd say good on good there. But the Rams special teams versus the Seahawks special teams is bad for the Rams and great for the Seahawks. A punt blocked versus the Panthers in the wild card round, and a kickoff return that really set the tone for the Seahawks in this past round. I think that's the difference in this game. Shaheed takes another one back or gets some long return, or they block a punt or miss kick from the Rams, and the Seahawks play by the spread in this one. They win by 3 in a crazy game that I do think gets high scoring. I'll go 31-28. But the Seahawks move on to a Super Bowl against the Broncos, which we saw about 10 years ago. And your matchup, the Patriots versus Rams, we also saw about 7 years ago, and that game sucked ass. Probably the worst Super Bowl of our lifetime.
They owe us.
I think any matchup except for the Broncos-Rams is a rematch of something that we vividly remember watching the game for.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. Maybe it's bad. I don't know. Let's get the Raiders and Jets in there. How about next year? But regardless, next week we'll know who's in the Super Bowl. We won't do our Super Bowl prediction because we have an extra week after that. So we'll do Pro Bowl game predictions. But in the meantime, we have our NBA midseason predictions because we haven't talked basketball in forever. We haven't talked about it this year. I know that, as far as 2026 goes. So let's do it. Picking the 1 through 8 seeds in the East and the West. We'll just do it in the playoff format. So we don't have the play-in included here because that part sucks regardless. So we'll start out in the first round. We'll go all the way through the East, all the way through the West. 1 versus 8 in the East. Who's your matchup and who's winning?
All right. Number 1, Detroit. I got to apologize to Sham. I thought they were a year away. Turns out the East is worse than last year even. I didn't know that was possible, but the Eastern Conference is very hard to watch. Detroit is clearly above most of the teams other than my number 2, but we'll get there later. I have Detroit playing a sneaky Milwaukee team that I think if they don't trade Giannis, they will get on a run, but I would have Detroit winning in 5, and then Giannis would eventually demand his trade.
I have Detroit as a 1 seed as well, too. They're 5.5 up right now. I think they've been the most consistent team in the East as well too. Have been playing Atlanta. I think even with the struggle ever since the Trae Young trade, I love Jalen Johnson. I love Dyson Daniels. I think they're a very defensive-minded team that can get some wins late in the season and get into playing, and from there the playing will really be suited for them with how the team plays defense. So they play Detroit in this round, but they get smothered. So Detroit wins that round. On to 2 versus 7.
All right, 2 versus 7 in the East is going to be the New York Knicks hosting Orlando as my 7 seed. The Knicks have not had a great couple of weeks, but that's because Jalen Brunson's been out. I don't blame them for that necessarily. I still think this is one of the most balanced teams in all the NBA. Orlando, on the other hand, definitely similar to the Atlanta team you were just talking about. I think maybe a little better defense. I went with them over Atlanta, basically. But either way, the Knicks should win this one. I had 6 games just because the Eastern Conference is wild, man. Never know.
I didn't pick games for any of this because I didn't want to go too far into it. My 2 versus 7 is the Celtics staying as the 2 seed, and my number 7 seed is going to be the Orlando Magic as well too. Orlando's had a weird year. They've navigated injuries to the Wagner brothers. PB and J, or PB and No J is what his nickname is now, with Paulo Banchero. He's had a rough year in terms of my expectations. Desmond Bane has been interesting as well too. Jalen Suggs has battled injury, I believe, as well. So I go with Boston in this one. Boston's done well with no Tatum. I assume they get deep into the playoffs. Maybe he's got a chance to come back, but Jaylen Brown's playing like an MVP candidate, and I think they win this series pretty easily. 3 versus 6.
All right, my number 3, the Cleveland Cavaliers. I still think they're on pace for good things. Maybe not number 1 seed good things. They've had a lot of off the field weird stuff going on over the past couple of years. But when everybody's healthy, these guys don't give up any points. I think they would beat my 6 seed Philly in a 7-game series. Philly kind of came out of nowhere. Edgecombe, Maxey, great. Embiid has even played a little bit, but I think this is where the run ends here until they get some size and some defense, and that's what Cleveland has.
My 3 seed is the Toronto Raptors. One of my favorite teams to bet on this year. They don't have a crazy star player, but Scotty Barnes, Brandon Ingram, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Kayla, I'm blanking on his first name, but Broyles, the rookie,
Colin Murray Broyles.
Solid.
Yeah.
He's been good as well too. Mamu as well too, I believe, had like 20 points a couple nights ago against the Lakers. They've been a fun team. They play good defense. And I think they have a good chance to, be a really good regular season team. They run into a 6 seed Cleveland, who's had an interesting year, navigated some injuries, but they do have that star player, Donovan Mitchell, who's going to be able to drop 30 for you at night in, night out once you get to the playoffs. So I think they upset the Raptors in this one as a 6 seed and move on to this quarterfinals. 4 versus 5.
This is one I really want to see go to 7 games. It's 2 teams definitely on the opposite parallel of trend right now, but I got the 4 seed Boston Celtics and the 5 seed Toronto Raptors. I think both should finish the year all right. I know I have Boston dropping down a bit here. It's just because they seem a little off, and I don't blame them. They don't have their best player, Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown's been awesome. They've been trying to fill in the holes, but I don't know, man. I didn't pick them. I picked Toronto to beat them in 7. Scotty Barnes is another DPOY candidate, and they just have more shooters, I think, which is crazy to say because Boston, that's kind of been their thing. But I'll take Toronto. Maybe it's an upset, maybe not when we get there, but like Toronto as a 5 seed getting out.
My 4 versus 5 is a fun rivalry. The Sixers and the Knicks as the 5 seed. Like you talked about a little bit, the Sixers have been a kind of an exciting team this year. A bit of a surprise as well, too, for them to be this good. Edgecombe's really good. Tyrese Maxey's an MVP candidate, all-star starter. Embiid's been good when he's healthy, and Paul George has contributed, I guess. The Knicks side, the Knicks have been interesting. They've struggled quite a bit this past couple of weeks, but I think they'll get out of their funk. And they definitely have the star players. Brunson when he's healthy. Cat is good, and Josh Hart coming back recently I think will help him as well too. So I have the Knicks beating Philly in this series, probably one that will go 6 or 7 games, not making the joke there. But a long series, and I think the Knicks come out on top. Sends us to the second round in the East. For you, 1-seeded Detroit versus Toronto.
Yep.
For me, it's 1-seeded Detroit versus 5-seeded Knicks. How do you have this series going down?
I think it's a fun matchup. We both like Toronto, obviously, and definitely less problems than your average 5-seeded Eastern Conference team. But I'm still going to take Detroit in this one. That just finding that other scorer this year next to Cade Cunningham has been awesome for him, and I guess it's their time. It's just their time. That's how it goes in the NBA, right? So I got them in 6.
So I have 1-seeded Detroit versus 5-seeded Knicks. Definitely a rivalry that we've seen not really a lot in our lifetime, but back in the 90s definitely was something that was going on. I think this would be a fun series. I think it's two very different identity teams. And as we see in the NBA, you got to lose before you win. And I think Detroit is up for their first big loss before they win. I think they can do it in the future. I just don't think they do it this year. And I have the Knicks, the 5-seed, upsetting them. The other matchup, you have the Knicks versus Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
I have Boston versus Cleveland here. So what do you have as the team that's going to the conference finals?
I expect a 7-game series here. This is going to be awesome. A matchup we've seen many, many times, but similar to Boston, something just seems a little off with Cleveland. This doesn't seem like it's the right group, even though you have guys like Mitchell now taking an even higher step than we thought he could get, 30 points per game. Same with Mobley becoming more of a scorer. But the Knicks are just better. They have a much better defense this season, a couple points per game even compared to the past Cleveland teams we've seen. I have the Knicks winning in 7, facing Detroit.
My matchup is Boston versus Cleveland. Hopefully Tatum's close to coming back at this point. I don't think he will quite yet, but maybe if they get to the Eastern Conference Finals, they do. I think it's very good for Boston that their main scorer is a big man. Because if you're going at Mobley or Allen, it's going to be tough for you. I know Garland's a good defender and Mitchell's not super lousy either. But Jaylen Brown having the season that he's having is in for a good matchup against Cleveland in this case, rather than having to rely on like an Anthony Davis or an Embiid or a Cat to get you points. Boston's got a ton of role players that have been there as well too, made shots in big moments. Cleveland seemed to be the team that's had the lights too bright for them in the past 5 years. And I think Boston as a 2-seed with the home court advantage is good enough to get into the conference finals. So I have a Knicks versus Boston conference finals matchup. You have Detroit versus the Knicks. Tell me how that conference finals goes. Who's getting to the NBA finals?
Yeah, this would be an awesome series, whether it's the last round like you had or me. And I have a very similar look at the series that you did, even though it's a round off. I think the Knicks have just so much more experience, of course, than Detroit at this point. And Detroit is probably not ready to go to the NBA Finals yet until they get a third scorer that we know for sure is an elite player and not a question mark. The Knicks do have that. They have Brunson and Towns, kind of a 1A, 1B, honestly. And Anunoby and Bridges have been excellent this season. Just a really hard group to score 120 points on, and that's why I have the Knicks going back to the finals.
My conference championship is the Knicks versus the Boston Celtics. This is the round I think Jason Tatum comes back. And I think after winning 2 rounds, you could think maybe adding in a big-time player like this could even hurt you because you haven't played together all year. But the Boston Celtics have won an NBA title with Tatum and Jaylen Brown. There is no rift between star players there. So I think adding Tatum back into the fold won't be tough for them. And I think it works pretty seamlessly like they did, having made the NBA Finals 2 out of the last 3 or 4 years at this point. I haven't beaten the Knicks here. I think the Knicks fall short once again. Great series, of course, but I think Boston just has a slight edge, and they move in to the NBA Finals. We did the East. Now we're moving to the West side. 1 versus 8 in the West. Who is it, and who's winning?
OKC will be my number 1 seed once again. of course. There's been some injuries to the other top teams we'll get to in a second here. So I don't see anyone challenging OKC for that top spot yet. I have them playing the Clippers as the 8 seed, another team that will have to turn things around here, but it's already started. They got healthy. They won 8 in a row. Jimmy Butler, of course, tore his ACL, so I didn't include them here. OKC, of course, would sweep the Clippers, though.
I have OKC versus Phoenix in this matchup. OKC is an easy 1 seed. Phoenix has been a team that surprised me this year. Maybe dropping a bit of, I don't know if I'd say ego, but going under a bit of the radar, playing really good defense. 111 points per game is, I guess, now one of the best defensive teams in the league. And I think that suits you well in the play-in setting or whatever. And I think they get in. Don't think they take a single game from OKC, though. They get swept. 2 versus 7. Who is it?
All right. My number 2 seed is going to be the Denver Nuggets. They've fallen behind San Antonio a little bit, but that's because Jokic is out. He'll come back eventually. Jamal Murray's been fine without him. Actually, very good. Like his best numbers since before his ACL injury. I have him playing the 7-seeded Lakers. Very weird team with the amount of time LeBron has missed this year, but I still think they'll make it. Unfortunately, Denver would beat them once again.
My 2 versus 7 starts with the San Antonio Spurs. I think they take the 2 seed. And then my 7 seed I do have is the Warriors. I think there's going to be some sort of move after the Jimmy Butler injury that gets them back into it. I think also Steph kind of turns it up a little bit and maybe gets close to back to averaging 30 points per game and goes on a bit of a run here. So I have the Warriors as the 7 seed, but I don't think it's going to be super close in this matchup. Even though the Warriors took back-to-back games in San Antonio earlier this year, given that extra year of experience since that time, really, because those were games super early in the season, I think San Antonio is good enough to beat the Warriors here and take them down. So you had Denver winning this matchup, right?
Yes.
Making sure I got it right. Mm-hmm. Okay. 3 versus 6. Who do you have and who's winning?
So here's where I got San Antonio as the 3 seed, maybe only a game off of Denver, but that's kind of how the West works here. So don't freak out if anyone's listening. It's like, what the hell, man? Where's Minnesota, you bastard? We'll get there. Don't worry. And the very next game. So San Antonio will play my 6 seed Phoenix. So I have Phoenix getting in before the play-in just because very good vibes for Phoenix. It's another weird team, but they're finally getting size and defense around Booker. Booker could take all the shots. He's fine. But now they're getting Mark Williams in there and even drafted a couple big men too. So I think they're definitely trending upwards for the first time in a while. But of course, San Antonio would beat them easily.
My 3 versus 6 is Houston versus LA, the Lakers in this one. Fun series, LeBron versus KD. Probably the last time that we see that matchup in their careers, which will be unfortunate, but also cool to see the one last go at it. I think Houston's a better team here. They're way better suited defensively and even a better offensive team as well, too. So I have Houston winning this series probably quicker than what most people think, 5 or 6 games at most. On to 4 versus 5.
Another one that I really, really want to see. So maybe it is unrealistic to drop some of these teams down a couple spots, but I have 4-seeded Houston playing 5-seeded Minnesota. You just mentioned Houston's defense. Maybe the only team in the West that can match them outside of the top team is Minnesota. So I have Minnesota beating them in 7 games. It was one of my hot takes of the preseason that Houston would be a first-round exit. This is the way that it would happen, is they unfortunately play a hot 5-seeded Minnesota who does match them defensively and has one of the best players in the world, Anthony Edwards.
My 4 versus 5 is a fun matchup as well, too. I have Minnesota as the 4 and Denver as the 5 seed. Jokic should be back at this point, so I don't think there's any concern there. But I think Minnesota is really well suited up to play Denver. I know Gobert's had his struggles at some points with Jokic, but I think it's a good matchup for him in comparisons to some of the other people that would be going up against him. Minnesota's got good enough defenders as well, too, to guard Jamal Murray and some of the other guys that the Nuggets have as well, too. And Anthony Edwards, I think, is the best big shot maker in this series. So I have Minnesota probably winning in 7 games, I would imagine. But the Timberwolves do end up moving on here. You had Houston winning, correct? Am I tripping
Yeah,
there? Okay.
Minnesota over
Okay. Yeah.
Houston.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which sets up the second round. You have OKC versus Minnesota to start the second round. I have a feeling I know who's going to win, but
Yeah.
who wins?
Yeah, rematch of last year's Western Conference Finals. And I do think Minnesota is slightly more prepared than they were. Like this team right now, Minnesota would crush last year's Warriors team, but they're not going to crush OKC. I got OKC in 6 games. They're so good. We'll get more to OKC as we get deeper, and there's no need to talk about it yet because they're on fire too.
So I also have OKC versus Minnesota. I don't think it's a close series. I think OKC probably beats them in five. This is a better OKC team than what we saw last year as well, too, which is pretty crazy to think. Another year for Chet, another year for J-Dub, another year for Shea, and they've been just as good, if not better. So OKC wins this one in 5 or 6 games at most. The next matchup is Denver versus San Antonio for you. It's San
Yep.
Antonio versus Houston for me. That's a fun and very different looking teams, I'd say, between the two. How do you think that one goes?
Yeah, Denver and San Antonio, fantastic, right? The two most exciting big men in the entire NBA, Jokic and Wembanyama, going at each other. And it might be crazy here, but I picked San Antonio to win in 7 games. They beat them down pretty good when Jokic was there, and they won the NBA Cup. So I feel like I have to take San Antonio right now. We have Wembanyama already back and looking great after his injury break. So I feel like I have to take San Antonio.
My matchup is a fun one as well, too. I have San Antonio versus Houston. Very much a defensive matchup in comparison to these other teams, but also two really good offenses with these two squads. I don't know if there's anybody that can really guard Wemby, but I think Sengun and the guys that they have in Houston, Thompson, even KD as well too, can do a good job because of the length that they have throughout their lineup, not just at the center and power forward position. And on the other side of it, outside of Wemby, it's going to be really tough. They don't really have a great matchup against any of these other guys. So I think Houston has enough in this series. They have KD, who's made a ton of big shots. And I think San Antonio, much like the Pistons, before you win, you have to lose in the NBA, and this is the part where they lose and don't make it quite yet. So Houston wins this series and sets up an OKC versus Houston conference championship for me. It's OKC versus San Antonio for you. Does OKC go back, or is Wemby going to the finals in year 3?
This would be an awesome series. Again, another matchup in the regular season that we've already seen a couple times. Fantastic games. So I would love to see this go 7. But I agree with you. At some point, it's going to catch up to San Antonio. They need just a couple more shooters around them, just like Detroit, like you said. And I think OKC, they keep finding more guys every single year. It's going to be so hard for anybody in the West, at least, to beat them. I did pick OKC to return. San Antonio may be a year away too.
I do think San Antonio is one of the teams that could beat OKC. I think if it goes in, that's probably the team that OKC does not want to play, considering how they've gotten under their skin a little bit. When they play, Wemby seems to turn up the most, but they don't have them in my scenario. They have Houston. This is the game that we saw to begin the NBA season, and this was, I believe, Houston was a team I picked to win the title at the beginning of the year. And it was a great start to the season in that game. They almost beat them in OKC, and foreshadowing 20 games in, if they beat them in OKC to start a team that's 20-2 at home, they'd have been like, okay, yeah, Houston's here to play. Not that game 1 is going to affect the conference finals, but I do think OKC has learned a bit quite from that game. They've looked better throughout since, and I think they beat Houston in this matchup. Probably a longer series. It takes 7 or 6 games, but I do think OKC goes back to the finals as well too. And in the finals, it's OKC versus the Knicks for you. OKC versus Boston for me. Does OKC go back to back, or do we have a new champ in the NBA?
Maybe the two most balanced teams in the entire NBA when they're healthy, of course. But just in the past week, we've seen OKC beat Cleveland and San Antonio by 30 points. They are still stacked. And that's why I'm taking OKC again. I got them beating the Knicks in 6 games. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander would be the MVP, of course. But the beauty of this OKC team is how anybody can get hot. AJ Mitchell, Carson, oh my God, why am I blanking? Williams, right?
Wallace.
Carson Wallace. Sheesh. I apologize, OKC.
Mhm.
But it reminds me of some of the older Warriors teams, like right before everybody hated them, where 1 through 8 can get hot and start hitting threes, and that's why I can't pick against OKC yet.
Yeah, my matchup between Boston and OKC, Boston's really the only team that does not have KD, Steph, or LeBron that has, say, more experience than OKC in these big moments. I guess you can argue Denver has some big moments as well too with their finals run, but really Boston is the more experienced team when it comes to this matchup, and that doesn't happen often against a team that's already won the NBA Finals the year prior. I think it's a team that could beat OKC as well too, especially if Tatum's back. They play good enough defense that would be tough on Shea, and on the other side, they have big enough shot makers that have made big shots in finals. They've lost in the finals. They've won in the finals. They know what it's like. I know the ebbs and the flow of the series. And OKC has kind of, I don't want to say cruised through 2 years at that point, but they kind of have. They haven't dealt with any crazy injuries. They haven't dealt with any, I guess they had some tough games against Indiana, and that series got pushed a bit farther than what we expected it to. But they didn't really ever have a moment where you're like, oh shit, like they are going to lose. And I think Boston can provide that for them. But I think they answer perfectly fine, and they come back and win the series regardless. So OKC wins the finals, finals MVP. It's just Shea. Like it's pretty easy. But OKC goes back to back, and our friend Ian is still not have as many rings as the Warriors, so we're still good there.
Mm-hmm.
NBA awards though: MVP, DPOY, Roy, Six Man, and MIP. MIP is the best award in all sports. So we'll start there. Who's your most improved player for this season?
Right now, I have no good reason to switch my pick of Amen Thompson. He's up to 19 points per game, 8 rebounds, 5 assists after moving to point guard this season, which I think has flown under the radar over the past couple of months that he's been doing this still. And I think the only reason his odds haven't skyrocketed, no pun intended, is because he still can't hit threes. But he's still one of the most improved players. And, that's the whole point of this award, I think, is to find a guy who improves his game the most. And I think that's been Amen Thompson.
Yeah. Keontae George is a fun topic here. He's averaged a lot of points, but I think the Jazz averaged like allowing 125 points per game. So it's really just shoot it because we're going to allow points either way on the other side. Jalen Johnson is a fun one. I think he's blossomed into top 15 or 20 player in the league. But when you talk about the most improved, especially on the narrative side, I don't think I could choose anybody else but Denny Advia because he has turned into a 26, 7, and 7 player, and that's just something I could have never foresaw. And the Portland Trailblazers are in a play-in spot right now. I didn't have them making the playoffs, but they're definitely a team that could still make a top 10 spot. And Advia has turned into an all-star. He's not going to get it or didn't get it, but an all-star starter caliber player, and that is just utterly ridiculous for a guy that was pretty much labeled as a bust 3 years ago in Washington, and now he is one of the best players in the NBA.
He's one of my guys, so I guess I could have mentioned him too. And maybe it is higher than I ever thought too he could get to, but I always believed in him, so that's why I didn't really consider him maybe.
What about Sixth Man of the Year?
So my original pick was Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He ended up starting for Trae Young like a week into the season. So I'm obviously going to have to switch off of that pick. I'm going to go to Naz Reid once again. He won this in 2023, and his numbers are even higher than usual, from 11 to 15 points per game. A big reason why Minnesota is just as good this season and why I have him winning a couple rounds too.
Yeah, Naz Reid is my pick as well. Averaging the most points in his career. 3-point percentage is just off of his best in 2023-24. And the Minnesota Timberwolves are just as good as we've seen them in the past 5 years. So Naz Reid, my Sixth Man of the Year. Rookie of the Year. What a fun pick, huh?
Yeah, Cooper Flag. It was a weird couple of weeks. Jason Kidd was trying to turn him into Ben Simmons for some reason, but I'm glad they got off of that whole nonsense. And Flag has been excellent ever since. 19 points, 6 and 4. Similar numbers to other rookies. Cedric Coward has been really good. Con Knipple, of course, but those guys don't guard the best guy on the other side every single night like Cooper Flag has done. That's why he was the number one pick.
Yeah, Cooper Flag's my pick as well too. Obviously has the best numbers, has the best odds by a long shot. I think he's like minus 900 to win this award. Um, Efficiency hasn't been crazy, but usually we see that with rookies, especially from 3-point line, hasn't been great, only 28% there. But he's been really good at getting to the rack when he needs to. And I think overall, consider this guy's a newly 19-year-old. He's pretty good. So Cooper Flag gets my rookie of the year. What about defensive player of the year?
There were some injuries that I'll talk about when we get to MVP, which may have altered this away from Wembanyama missing some time. But what I found was very interesting looking at defensive ratings this morning. There's only one guy above 6'5" with comparable defensive ratings to Alex Caruso. His teammate, Chet Holmgren. 8 rebounds, 2 blocks. OKC is just miles ahead of everybody when it comes to playing defense and being the anchor of the team. I think he would get it over Caruso or Wallace or Mitchell or anybody else you would want to give it to on OKC.
Yeah, Wemby was my pick to start the year. I think he's dealt with a little bit too much of injury and minutes limitation, not limits meditation. That doesn't really make sense. Said it backwards there, but he hasn't played enough to win the award, in my opinion. Same thing with MVP. So I went with Rudy Gobert. Pretty safe pick. Another really good defensive season from Rudy, as you expect. And Minnesota's a good team. So I think he fits in still. I think it makes sense. I know he's not the favorite right now. I think Chet's the favorite by a little bit, but I think I could see him winning here. So Rudy Gobert wins another Defensive Player of the Year. And then the MVP, the most sought-after award in basketball. Pretty easy, I think, in my eyes.
Yeah, Wembanyama we talked about, he's already back, so I'm not going to give him a 0% chance. But Nikola Jokic has definitely missed too much time at this point. So Shai Gilgeous-Alexander wins it again. 32 points per game off of 55% from the field. Also only 2 turnovers per game. Compare that to Luka. He's got over 5, I think. So just the most efficient player. Is it too absurd to say the most efficient player since Michael Jordan at shooting guard? Because this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. SGA is my MVP as well too. Like you said, Jokic I think has missed enough time and will miss enough time to not get it. SGA's upped his field goal percentage by a substantial margin. He's upped his 3-point percentage by a substantial margin, even though he's shooting less of them. His free throws, shooting more of them a game than what he shot last year. Less points per game, so maybe not playing as much. I think his minutes down about a half a minute right now. But regardless, most efficient player in the NBA from the shooting guard position that we've seen in a long time. Very intentional with what he does as well too. You don't really see him, mistake his way into bad shots or anything like that. He knows what to do and he knows how to get to his spots. So SGA gets back-to-back MVPs and, like we talked about, back-to-back titles as well too. So SGA on the top of the world in the NBA right now. Although, is he the best player in the league? I don't know if I can definitively say that. Maybe Jokic still has it. But regardless, that's our NBA check-in. We'll probably check in once the playoffs start, do this all over again. But in the meantime, we have our MLB notables. And it's been, I'd say, a pretty slow week in the MLB. We'll start off on the 13th. Where we got Nolan Arenado being sent from the Cardinals to the Diamondbacks for starting pitcher Jack Martinez. Nolan Arenado has this year and next year on his contract. St. Louis is still going to pay most of that, so Arizona's just getting pretty much a cheap Nolan Arenado, which is good. He's not the greatest anymore, but definitely still a serviceable player. I think I actually talked about that last week, so maybe I don't have to talk about that. The next day, though, definitely talk about this. Ranger Suarez signed a 5-year contract with the Boston Red Sox, 30-year-old who's had some really good seasons in Philly. He goes over there and signs a deal there. Oh, there was a big couple really big things in the MLB. I don't know how I missed it. Kyle Tucker, 4-year deal, $240 million with the Dodgers. One of the craziest AAV deals that we've ever seen. 60 per, I believe it's just Shohei Ohtani who's ahead of him in AAV. Signs that short year deal instead of that long term, 15-year deal that could have happened with him. Tries to go win a couple more rings, and I assume we'll at least get 1 or 2 during that time. 3-team trade that happened about 10 minutes after that. Gavin Lux and Chris Clark go to the Tampa Bay Rays. Josh Lau goes to the Angels, and Brock Burke, a reliever, goes to the Cincinnati Reds. Burke, good left-handed reliever, probably fits right into that 7th, 8th inning role for the Reds or lefty specialists. Josh Lau has battled a ton of injuries in recent times, but kind of retakes that Taylor Ward role, who was just traded over to Baltimore earlier this offseason. And Gavin Lux, former top prospect, I would say has a failed season in Cincinnati, but doesn't perform the greatest there. Tampa Bay takes a chance on him on an infield that's kind of all over the place right now, and they get him to add into their fold. The very next day, or not, still the same day actually, we saw Willie Castro sign a 2-year deal with the Colorado Rockies, which is a bit of a crazy one. Maybe he's just going for counting stats at this point in his career or wants to get traded. But he's going to play every day, pretty much whatever position he wants to with the Rockies. So good for Willie and getting the bag, I guess. But I would imagine there would have been some more teams on him than the Rockies. Very next day, we saw JT Realmuto ink a 3-year deal back with the Philadelphia Phillies. 3 for $45, I believe, and a chance to get up to 3 for $60 if some incentives go his way. 35 years old now at this point, so this takes him to age 38. I don't know how many catchers we see play till 38, so that should be interesting there. But JT Realmuto obviously is still a pretty unique catcher in the game and valuable for the Phillies because he's been there for so long. And then we also got Bo Bichette signing a very high AAV 3-year deal with the New York Mets. I believe it's about $42 million per year there. Way higher than market value than I expected. He has opt-outs after year 1 and year 2, although I expect him to stay for all 3 unless he has a best season of his career, because I don't think he was ever going to get more than $42 million per year from anybody. Expected to play third base. I would assume Vientos and Beatty platoon at first. Polanco plays DH. Semien plays second, and obviously Lindor at shorts. That would be my guess on how that infield works out. Jet Williams, you are going to be a Detroit Tiger, perhaps, once they trade for Tariq Skubal, because I have no clue where they are going to play you with how the current things work out. Next day, not much. The day after that, not much. The 19th, we got Jorge Mateo signing a 1-year deal with the Atlanta Braves. Might be like, what the heck? They already signed a shortstop this year in Ha-Seong Kim. He has a torn ligament in his finger and will be out 4 to 5 months. You factor in 4 to 5 months from now, you're looking at May or June. Jorge Mateo has had a pretty good April once in his career. I don't know. It probably had no reason on that effect, but he's a serviceable fielder and a guy that will hit ninth for you, and when he gets on base, will steal bases. So Mateo finds a spot in Atlanta, at least for the first couple months of the year. And then today, a couple avoiding arbitration deals, nothing crazy there. Osvaldo Bido designated for assignment once again after being picked up 2 days ago. So he's on like his 4th team of the offseason. But regardless, that's where we're at right now. And as soon as we end the podcast, I'm sure there will be something else going on as well too. But that's where we're at right now. January 20th, 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. As we move into our layups bowl predictions before we get on out of here. Last week was a rough one for me. I had Bills money line layup. Brandon Cooks caught it. I don't know. I don't know if he did catch it. I can't really tell. So that goes red regardless. Skyler has the Rams versus Chicago over 48.5.
I
That goes red as well
underestimated the
too.
snow.
Yeah, that game was colder than I expected. The defenses were better than I expected, and the Bears' offense on 3rd and 1 was a whole lot worse than I expected. So that goes red. This week, I chose Seattle money line. They are 2.5 point favorites. I think they win at home. I think it's probably like minus 150, minus 145. So I have them winning here.
Similar to my Bo Nix pick that we'll get into in a second here when Kyle talks about it. I'm going with another Denver quarterback to go over on his passing yards. I got Jarrett Stidham over 200 passing yards. I found this positive line here, plus 114 for 200 yards. It just seems to be the way that Denver's offense works. You don't want him to drop back 40 times in this game. You want to control the clock, but at some point they're going to have to start pushing the ball. And you would imagine if New England has a lead at any point, they're going to let Jarrett Stidham take the underneath stuff. And, it usually adds up to 200 yards if you don't have a terrible game like Stroud did last week.
Last week, I had Bears money line for my bold prediction. That goes red, unfortunately. Skyler had Bo Nix over 250 passing yards, plus 240. That goes green. A throw script as we kind of expected in that game. So good job on that one. This week, I have the Broncos money line. I picked them to win. So I think it makes sense for me to take them on my bold prediction here. They're plus 210 according to DraftKings right now. Probably going to stay similar once we get to game time. Maybe go higher just because the amount of bets on New England, I'd imagine. But I would not be shocked if the Broncos win this game, and I think they win it at those odds in Denver. I think it's a good chance. So Broncos money line. They don't really run the ball that much anyways against a really good run defense in New England. I think it works out well for Stidham, and they have a good game.
Yeah, very interesting. The rare conference championship week where we have opposite picks for both games. So I will say, of course, I want to be 100%, but if we're 50-50, I wonder which side pulls through. Obviously, something crazy will have to happen. But for my bold prediction, I'm going to go with the other game that I haven't talked about yet on my picks. I have Blake Corum, anytime touchdown, plus 280. Here's the thing with the Rams. Kyron Williams got absolutely rocked last week on the first play of overtime, and he didn't come back in. I haven't seen one report on his health. Not one time someone's mentioned, hey, you remember when Kyron Williams had a concussion in the divisional round? Where is he? Is he practicing? What's going on? Either way, I think he's going to play since we haven't said that they haven't said he's out or anything yet. But maybe that will encourage them to give Blake Corum a drive instead of his one play to come in on third down. Maybe they'll give him a drive in this game. So I'm going to take the touchdown. I thought this was better than taking like Stafford 380 yards or something because that's a lot of yards to ask for.
That's going to do it though for episode 278. Next week, 279, we'll know the Super Bowl matchup. We won't pick it. But maybe we'll have we'll definitely have more head coaching stuff. Hopefully,
yes.
Hopefully, Giro Evero is not. Hopefully, Giro Evero is not the Raiders head coach at that point. That would suck. But we'll see what else. Maybe I don't think we have any more possible head coach firings. Maybe Andy Reid retires.
Still possible. Hey, we haven't heard from Kelsey in a while either.
Exactly. Maybe he retires. That would be good for the game, good for the sport, good for my livelihood. MLB stuff's pretty much all good to go. We have a couple starters. Valdez, Nick Martinez, Zach Gallen, some interesting guys left to sign. Gino Suarez left to sign. Bellinger's one. Seems like he might go back to the Yankees, but we'll see there. Getting closer to the MLB season, though. That's cool. I think pitchers and catchers report for the A's on February 11th. I think it's pretty similar throughout the MLB this year because there is no international games prior to the year except for the World Baseball Classic. So a couple weeks away there, which is good. And college football season's over. Alberto Mendoza is at Georgia Tech Yellow Jacket. Is that what they are?
Yep.
Yeah. So good for Alberto. Is he starting? I don't know. But
I would imagine.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Takes over the Haynes King role. A bit more of a runner than Fernando, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But good for him. Good for the Hoosiers. And good for whoever's making the movie because I will be watching.
Yeah, Hoosiers too.
Yeah, exactly. I was joking with my brother last night. I was like, "Oh, at least they already got the name for this one. Just call it Hoosiers."
Perfect.
Wait, so he's taken. But yeah, any parting notes?
I was just going to say, I'm surprised how close Toronto came again to getting Kyle Tucker. I guess they didn't want to give him a higher AAV than Vlad for good reason, but that's what he wanted.
Yeah, got 10 years. I think it was like 10,350 or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess people will decline 350 million. Wish I had that option.
Yeah. Well, it comes with a guaranteed ring on your finger, I guess, too, right?
Yeah, but you got to live in Toronto, so how good can it be?
All right, Kyle.
Anyways, yeah, we'll see you next week.
See you next week. 279. Adios.